You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to the Ballin in the Six podcast, your Niagara source for all NBA news, rumors, season previews, playoff discussions, and in-depth analysis from Chicco Nacion of the Scores basketball division within the heart of the Six, Toronto, Ontario. Here are your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Chicco Nacion.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a very special installment of the Ballin in the Six podcast, our March Madness 2021 tournament preview right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your March 16th, 2021 edition. Your source North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates, giveaways, and sponsorship promo codes by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as liking us on Facebook and Instagram. As well, you can find us on many platforms, including Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer by searching the Armchair GM Sports Network, of course. And lastly, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding our network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors are all on there. Please go and check that out, and please give us a like and a subscribe on whatever platform you listen to us right now. It always helps. And as always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputo13 with a Canadian Z. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by not one, but two co-hosts for a very special edition. It was so big that I needed to have two co-hosts for this. Firstly, joining us as always on the basketball portion of the network, he is Chicco Nacion. He is a contributing writer for the Score.com and their basketball division. You can follow him on Twitter at Chicco_N. Chicco, welcome back as always. Always appreciate having your insight on the show when it comes to basketball.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And joining us today, who usually helps us on the NCAA football portion of the network, he is Treigh Patterson, a contributing writer for Fox Sports Knoxville, covering the Tennessee Vols. You can follow him on Twitter at Treigh Patterson. Treigh, welcome, and excited to have your insight as well on talking some NCAA basketball today.
Yeah, it's been a while. College football's been over for a little bit now. It's good to be back.
Yep, absolutely. So, again, a little disclaimer from me as the host of this show. I am not well-versed in the college basketball world, which is why I have my two co-hosts with me today who have a vast knowledge when it comes to college basketball, a lot more than I do. So I appreciate having them both on today, and I'm just going to kind of lead them into directions with the conversation and let you have their insight, because my insight is probably worth as much as a bracket that you can fill out for free online. So with that said, guys, though, on today's show, we're going to go over just the general thoughts on the bracket, thoughts on the winners and losers from Selection Sunday, the odds to win the tournament, some players to look out for, and we're going to get the two co-hosts here, Final Four at the end of the show here. So with that said, this first segment today is brought to you by Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, one of the best pizza and wing combos built from right here in Niagara Falls, 4 years running from Niagara this week. Visit them at carmine'spizzeria.ca and like their Facebook page as well. Available for call-in, pickup, or delivery. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, way too good. Speaking of way too good, Chicco, go ahead and plug the article that you put up on the Score.com regarding your winners and losers from the tournament this week.
Yeah, my coworker and I kind of talked about, we chose three winners and three losers from Selection Sunday. For me, probably one of the biggest winners was Gonzaga. Now, this team is going to attempt to be the first school since Indiana 45 years ago to go undefeated from start to finish. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of pressure and a lot of eyes on Gonzaga to see if they'd be able to accomplish that. But I think they have to feel pretty good about their draw that they've got. The highest seeds in their region are Iowa, Kansas, as well as Virginia. And they beat all three of those teams pretty handily in their non-conference schedule. They averaged nearly 100 points on 58% shooting in those wins against those three teams. So, I mean, Gonzaga has to be the favorite coming out of that region, and for sure they're going to have confidence, to come through and go through for a Final Four.
Yep, so make sure you're checking that out on the Score.com and in their basketball section on their website. And Treigh, you also wrote a piece about the Tennessee Vols basketball this week. Go ahead and just quickly discuss what you talked about on your article this week.
Yeah, so I focus more just on Tennessee athletics, and this was just a piece on Rick Barnes in general about not living up to the expectations that were put on this team this season. They have two players in Keon Johnson and Jaden Springer who are projected to be lottery picks, and they fell flat this year. There's no other way to put it. They were expected to win their conference. They came in fourth in the regular season and then fell out in the semifinals to Alabama in the tournament. So it was just a piece talking about with how much money Rick Barnes is being paid. He's not living up to the expectations that the fan base has for him.
Yeah, so some cold hard facts from Trey over there. He also talked about Jeremy Pruitt on Tennessee's football portion during the season. So make sure you're checking both these guys out. Great writers on their respective websites. So with that said, gentlemen, let's take a look at your biggest takeaways from Selection Sunday. Let's begin with you, Chicco. What were your thoughts on just some of the biggest winners and losers? Again, you talked about it in the article, but just quickly for reference here, teams that maybe didn't make it that you thought deserved it, or teams that maybe got the short end of the stick on certain draws.
I think the Big Ten were definitely among the winners. They had 9 teams into the tournament, and they were very well represented at the top from Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, Iowa, and Purdue. They all got top 4 seeds, and even some teams that were on the bubble, like Michigan State. They were able to get into at least the play-in game for the tournament, despite having an up-and-down season. So I think the Big Ten was definitely a winner. And in terms of the losers, I guess you could say conference runner-ups in the tournaments. Oklahoma State, I think for sure, got the really short end of the stick there as they were playing their best basketball of the season over the last month. But they only managed to get a 4 seed, which is kind of hard to kind of wrap your head around, considering that only Illinois had more quad 1 wins than them this season. And they were on a bit of a hot streak as well. They won 8 of their past 10 games. They had 2 victories over West Virginia. They were one of the only teams to beat Baylor this season. Yet somehow they're ranked 4th in their region. They're behind West Virginia. And they're also in the same region as Illinois. So it's going to be tough. I mean, I think they have the pieces to potentially make a run, but going up against Illinois in a potential Sweet 16 matchup is going to be a really difficult task for them.
Yeah, Trey, what do you think about that Oklahoma State and just their path that they have to take now?
I agree that they did get a really tough draw. That was going to be one of the points I was going to touch on. But at the same time, I think they have to be happy that they're even being allowed to play in the tournament, because they were on postseason probation going into the season, and I don't even think they knew whether or not they were going to be allowed to play in this tournament a week ago. So you could look at them and say that they're a loser in the sense that they got a really bad draw, but on the same hand, they're a winner for being allowed to participate.
Trey, what is your takeaway from somebody that maybe got the short end of the stick with the draw other than Oklahoma State?
Other than Oklahoma State, I would say probably Alabama. I think they got a pretty tough draw, just in that bottom part of their bracket. I think Texas is going to be a really tough matchup for them in the Sweet 16, and I think that they even showed enough winning their conference at the end that they could have taken that 1 spot away from Michigan, but they stuck. They got placed down there at the 2, and I don't really see a clear path for them to make it to the Final Four.
I want to get your guys' thoughts on the Duke Blue Devils, who are usually a lock for this tournament, and they did not make it this year. Chicco, what were your thoughts on Coach K and the Blue Devils not being involved in the tournament this year?
Yeah, they just didn't have a great year in general. They have obviously every year they bring a lot of 5-star talents, and I think with this year not really having a preseason to build up and kind of integrate them into the system, I think really hurt teams like Duke and Kentucky, who rely on all those fresh faces basically year in and year out. So I think that put them behind the 8 ball at the start. And some of the guys they kind of were looking forward to potentially take that next step, like a Wendell Moore, for example, he wasn't able to really improve much on his freshman year. Matthew Hurt was pretty solid for them, but I think in general, with freshmen, they have their inconsistencies, and that's going to happen. And that was the case this year for Duke. And they started to pick up some steam in the ACC tournament before, unfortunately, I believe one of the players, I think it was a player that tested positive for COVID-19. So that took them out of the tournament, and they pretty much needed a run to the finals or probably win the whole thing in order to lock up their spot, because they just didn't have as good enough as a resume to be an at-large selection.
Treigh, did you kind of echo that sentiment from Chicco there about just Duke's season this season?
Yeah, I think you can say the casual basketball fan, just in general, is a winner this year with no Duke or Kentucky in the tournament. First time since 1976 that's happened. So it'll be nice to see some fresh faces, new teams, kind of be the front runners, not just necessarily the blue bloods. But yeah, they just didn't have the resume this season. They lost a lot of games that you just don't expect of Duke to lose, and unless they would have won their conference championship, I just saw no way for them to get in.
Yeah. Do you think that it hurts them with the fact that, those types of schools lose guys every year? It seems like, they still have a couple years left of eligibility, but when they come from those schools and they're that talented, they usually go to the NBA draft kind of early. Do you think that hurts schools like that, Chicco?
It's I like every year they got 5 stars coming in and out, but like when they also have some guys that were coming back and who know what the standard is at Duke and are supposed to be there as mentors, and like I said, they just didn't play up to standards. Joey Baker, a guy is in his junior year, pretty highly touted recruit coming into Duke. He was in the same class as Zion Williamson, and his big strength is being a 3-point shooter, and he just didn't give them that shooting that Duke needs. And I think a lot of the guys kind of underperformed this year that they were depending on to take that leap and also kind of take the young guys under their wing.
Yeah, so Duke being a team that didn't deserve it this year, which we never thought we would say that. But going off that, Treigh, is there a team that you thought that was left out after Selection Sunday that maybe you thought deserved a chance to be in this tournament this year?
Yeah, the only team that I think can make a definitive argument would probably be Belmont out of the OVC. They ended up losing their conference tournament. I think they lost in the semifinals. I'm not sure on that, but they lost to eventual champion Morehead State, who got the automatic bid from that conference. But Belmont, I don't have their record in front of me, but they won something like 24 games, I want to say, this season. They just are hindered by the fact that they play in the OVC and don't have any quality out-of-conference wins or in-conference for that matter. So the lack of quality wins on their resume is probably what kept them out.
Chicco, what do you think of that? Is there a team that you thought maybe deserved a spot and didn't unfortunately get in this year?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Treigh. I think Belmont is probably the biggest omission from the field this year. I mean, there's some talk about Louisville is one of the 4 replacement teams on standby right now, but I mean, Louisville really could have controlled their fate if they had beaten Duke in the ACC tournament. They lost to Duke, and so that didn't help their chances, of course. They didn't help themselves being able to try to get a bid into the tournament, and they also had some pretty lopsided loss this year. I mean, they lost to North Carolina 99-54 earlier this season. And so, I mean, stuff like that, when you have lopsided losses on your resume, and obviously you don't make a deep run at all in your conference tournament, that's not going to help your cause to get into the big dance.
No, absolutely not. So those are some teams to watch out for, guys. And again, it's interesting. It's only 64 teams make it, and there's so many talented teams that don't get in with an opportunity, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the nature of college basketball. But with that said, without going over each individual conferences, like we can't go over all of them in today's show, but biggest takeaways from conference championship week. Let's start with you, Treigh. Was there somebody that ended up winning a conference that you were very surprised about or didn't see coming that ended up becoming a conference champion in one of the conferences, big conferences, that is?
Well, I think the 2 most intriguing conference tournaments to have watched this past week were the Big Ten and Big 12 tournaments. I think most people would agree that those were the 2 premier college conferences going into this past season. And Texas winning their conference in the Big 12, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I had actually, before the tournament started, I had pegged West Virginia as the 4 seed in the tournament to come away with that. I thought they were going to upset Baylor. Ended up being Oklahoma State, who upset West Virginia and then upset Baylor, only to lose to Texas in the final. So I think Texas being able to win that conference was good for them. And then the same for Illinois. I mean, I think it just kind of solidified what we already knew. But I think the big takeaway out of that is Michigan is very beatable. We've seen that the past couple weeks, that they are a very beatable 1 seed.
Chicco, what are your thoughts on the Big Ten and the Big 12 and how that shook out? Do you kind of echo what Treigh said?
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12, obviously the favorite heading into there was Baylor going in, but Texas was a bit of a surprise. But credit to Shaka Smart and his team being able to come up with some big wins down the stretch. They weren't playing so well going into the tournament, but for them to be able to come through in that tournament with some big wins, that's a credit to Shaka Smart and kind of the season that they've had so far. The Big Ten is always going to be a battle, no matter who you're playing in there. We saw Minnesota, a team that was second last, nearly beat Ohio State. I think that game went to overtime or double OT, but it just goes to show how tough the Big Ten is to come out of there. And good for Illinois. It's been some time since they've won that conference championship, and so definitely exciting time for their fan base. But in terms of a couple of surprises, I would say Georgetown coming out of the Big East and Oregon State coming out of the Pac-12. Georgetown, really good rebounding team, but I really did not see them going to make this run and going all the way to the tournament. And Oregon State as well. I think it was a bit of a shocker for them to even beat a team like, I think Oregon's probably the best team in the Pac-12, and I was shocked that they were able to beat them and go on all the way to the championship.
Treigh, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Georgetown, I think them winning the conference was good for the Big East. That's a big name with Patrick Ewing as the head coach for them. And he got to finally win a championship up there in Madison Square Garden. So good for him. And then Oregon State, too. I don't think anybody predicted Oregon State to come out of the Pac-12. I even saw one of the betting accounts on Twitter retweeted somebody who placed a $100 bet on Oregon State to win their conference back in January at plus like 100,000 odds, and the guy walked away with $150,000 on that. So that just goes to show how long the odds were for them to come out of there.
Yeah, that's a heck of a journey for them. But the one team that sticks out to me is Virginia, obviously losing to Georgia Tech in the ACC. Chicco, did that surprise you, and the fact that Georgia Tech went all the way and won the ACC conference there?
I am surprised that Georgia Tech went all the way, but the ACC just hasn't been as talented as it's been in the past. And Virginia and Florida State were probably, I guess, your consensus better teams in the conference. But, I mean, each of those teams are kind of vulnerable. Virginia they're still a pretty solid team defensively, but they aren't as elite as they were in past years. I mean, the pack line defense, they're always a stingy team. They slow the pace down, and obviously they're defending national champions. But I think because they don't defend as well as previous iterations of Tony Bennett's team, that they are a bit vulnerable this year. But I am shocked that Georgia Tech was able to go all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to echo that, I mean, Georgia Tech technically didn't beat Virginia. Virginia had to withdraw from the tournament due to COVID. So if they would have been forced to play Virginia in that second round matchup for them, who knows if they make it to the final. I mean, you got to give them credit for going there and winning it. But I think you would still have to put somewhat of an asterisk beside it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that has to be looked at as well going into the tournament, how Virginia shakes out with that. But lastly, the SEC tournament, Treigh, in your former neck of the woods in Nashville, Tennessee, Alabama ended up winning it. Former head coach of the UB Bulls up here, Nate Oates, getting it done for Alabama. So obviously they're a football powerhouse. But what did you think of the SEC basketball conference this year, Treigh, and Alabama taking out LSU in a repeat of last year's national championship game in football?
Well, I think this tournament played out pretty much exactly the way many people thought they would. The semifinals included all four top seeds in Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, and LSU. Arkansas being the 2 seed, who was upset by LSU. If you want to call it an upset, a 3 over a 2 is not really that big of an upset. And then Alabama versus LSU, I think, is one of the best college basketball games I've watched all year. It was just back and forth the entire game, and LSU had a chance to win it at the very end with the guy went for a 3 for the win. They only needed 2. And airballed it, and one of the guys got an offensive rebound and tried to tip it in, and the ball just rattled out. So, I mean, LSU had a chance to win it at the end. I think Alabama's beatable. We saw that with Tennessee. They were up on them by 15 before Alabama came back and eventually won that game. Alabama has weaknesses. If they're not hitting the 3 for that game, if they go on a cold spell, they're very beatable. But as far as the tournament played out, I think it happened just the way everybody thought it would.
Chicco, what are your thoughts on how the SEC shook out there?
Yeah, I agree with Trey. I think Alabama was the odds-on favorite. Obviously, they're the top seeds, but I think everyone expected them to come out on top. And it's been a great year for Nate Oates. I mean, just a few years ago, like you said, he was coaching at University of Buffalo, and he's transformed and brings some life to the Crimson Tide program. I think this was their first championship since 2001, I believe. It's been quite some time since they've had a run here in the SEC tournament, and they're an up-tempo team. They, as Trey alluded to, they knocked down a lot of threes and one of the highest scoring offenses in the nation, and so they're definitely an exciting brand of basketball to watch. I do agree with him in saying that they are potentially vulnerable. They are missing Josh Primo right now, a Canadian guy that's kind of some of us know up here, and he's had some moments for them offensively for them, but he's a pretty good defender as well, and I'm not sure what his status is leading into the tournament, but you lose a guy like that, a guy that started 19 games for you this year, that's going to have its effect, maybe not in the first round, but maybe in their second round matchup.
And lastly, we're talking about somewhat local teams up here, Chicco, somewhat in the Niagara region in Western New York. And Nate Oates used to coach at UB. St. Bonaventure is somewhat of a local team in the Western New York area. What do you think of them getting in this year as a school that's not very well known outside of the parts of Western New York?
Yeah, a really stingy defensive team. They were 5th in points allowed this year. They only allowed just over 60 points a game. So they're gonna be a tough out. LSU, I drew them in the first round. I mean, it's kind of polar opposites. LSU is a high scoring team. You're going up against a defensively sound team in the Bonnies, and so that's gonna be a pretty intriguing 8-9 matchup. The winner of that gets Michigan in the next round, and who knows what happens there. Michigan isn't at full health right now. They're missing Isaiah Livers, so depending on his status for a potential round of 32 game against either one of those two, it'll be interesting to see if he'll be back for that matchup.
Yeah, it was almost like when Niagara University made it. God, that seems like so long ago, Chicco. The fact that a small school from Western New York makes it to the tournament, I guess it's good for that area, since the UB Bulls, other than their football program, don't really have much to cheer for at the moment. And even Nate Oates before he went up and got that job at Alabama.
Yeah, and even like when Bobby Hurley was coaching as well. I mean, there were a couple of times where, they were close to getting, some big wins in the tournament. And then obviously Nate Oates got that win a few years ago against Arizona with that squad featured DeAndre Ayton. So, they've produced some good people out of that program in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our commercial break on the show today. We're going to come back and get more insight from Chicco and Trey on the tournament and get their Final Four as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned to that. So stay right here. We'll be right back on a special edition of the Ballin' in a Six podcast with our March Madness preview, and right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, serving traditional-style Italian pizzas made with the freshest, top-quality ingredients. Loaded subs and their famous chicken wings. Winners of the Reader's Choice Diamond Award, 4 years running from Niagara this week for Best Pizza and Wings in Niagara Falls. Home of the best tray and wing combo in town for the price and quality. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., located on the corner of Drummond Road and Dunn Street. Available for call-ahead pickup or delivery at 905-374-4400. Make sure to like them on Facebook and view their website for their menu at carmine'spizzeria.ca. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, way too good. As we all adjust to this new world that we're living in today, masks are now mandatory, and Niagara's own Custom PPE is Canada's leading face mask provider. Visit them online at customppe.ca and choose between several mask options with different colors and sizes. Add your organization, company, or team logo so you make your face masks unique. Available to purchase online 24/7 at customppe.ca and shipped within 1 week. They have the best prices and quickest turnaround in Canada, and no order is too big or too small. Also offering custom floor stickers as well as face and counter shields for your business or workplace. Visit customppe.ca and use the code ARMCHAIR at checkout for 20% off your custom or blank face mask today. Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider. Attention job seekers, if you are currently looking for work in the Niagara region, you owe it to yourself to check out the services provided by the Niagara Employment Help Center, located at 6100 Throwstone Road, Niagara Falls, directly across from the Camisos Plaza. Their free services include resume and cover letter writing, community resource and referral information, local labor market information, job search strategies, assistance with clarifying employment training and career goals, employment counseling and job search support, second career information and registration assistance, and all their services are currently provided by appointment only. So give them a call at 905-358-0021 or visit their website at ehc.on.ca, the Niagara Employment Help Center. This Employment Ontario program is funded by the Government of Ontario.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second segment of today's special edition of the Ballin in the Six podcast, our March Madness tournament preview. Brandon Caputo, Chicco Nacion, and Treigh Patterson back with you here. And this segment today is brought to you by Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider. Best prices and quickest turnaround, built from right here in the Niagara region. Order today at customppe.ca. We've got ours. Time to get your custom mask to keep everybody safe. Customppe.ca. With that said, gentlemen, again, this is a tournament that we usually get every year, but because of the pandemic last year, unfortunately, it's been 2 years in the making now. And talking in the commercial break there about Virginia in 2019 winning that tournament and just their kind of ride to that. Want to get your guys' thoughts on that on the air. Chicco, what did you think of Virginia winning that back in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible run. Treigh, as Treigh alluded to, they lost the year before as the number 1 seed against a 16 seed, and in their very first game of the next tournament, they were down at halftime to Gardner-Webb, so it was kind of like deja vu all over again. But obviously they were able to come back, and they had many close calls along the way. There was that Elite Eight matchup against Purdue where people remember Kie Clark going into the backcourt and just throwing a one-handed pass to Mamadi Diakite, and they beat the buzzer, send it to overtime, and they win that game. And obviously the matchup against Auburn in the Final Four was a tight one as well, and they go into OT and basically complete one of the greatest redemption stories in college basketball, at least in recent years.
Treigh, what were your thoughts on that run?
Oh, I think Chicco pretty much covered everything I would want to say. It was just incredible to watch, I think, as in terms of a team getting immediate redemption for what happened to them the year prior. They were the first team to ever lose to a 16 seed as the 1 seed. And I know that, as a fan base, they probably were pretty embarrassed by that. So to come back out the next year and then go all the way and actually win the national championship, and they did it in an exciting factor. I don't remember a single game actually being a blowout in their favor. Every game was close, tight, and exciting to watch. So yeah, it was really cool to see, and hopefully we get something similar to that this year.
Good segue into that, Treigh. Let's talk about Virginia itself in the West portion of the bracket. They've got to go through Gonzaga. They're a 4 seed this year. They had an 18-6 record this season. Do you see them having a way into the Final Four here, even though they have to go through Gonzaga if they were to?
Well, to get to Gonzaga first, they would have to get past Creighton as well, and Creighton's not going to be a pushover either if they meet up in the second round. My thing with Gonzaga is I know they're 26-0. They're probably most people's favorites to outright win the tournament. They had plenty of really good out-of-conference wins early in the season, but as the season progressed, they were playing conference only, and everybody knows that their conference isn't the strongest in college basketball. So I'm worried that maybe they've coasted towards the end a tad and not playing many high-level competition teams towards the end of the season could become a factor in the tournament. And when they get tested, are they going to be able to rebound the way other teams that might have been playing tougher competition along the way will be able to?
With that said, Chicco, before I get your thoughts on that, so the 4 number 1 seeds, Baylor, Illinois, Michigan, and Gonzaga. What are your thoughts on those, the 4 number 1s? And based off the odds here, Gonzaga is projected, again, this is from oddshark.com, it goes 1 Gonzaga at plus 180, Illinois at second at plus 550, Baylor third at plus 550, so tied with Illinois, and then Michigan at plus 700. Do you think that is the way that you would have it go, with Gonzaga 1, Illinois 2, Baylor 3, Michigan 4 for the 4 number 1 seeds?
I would agree with that. I do like Gonzaga's draw for them. I think having those wins, as I said earlier, against Iowa, Virginia, as well as Kansas, the top seeds in their region, I think that kind of has to give you a psychological edge at least. Illinois, I think they're going to have a tough matchup in the Sweet 16 if they happen to face Oklahoma State, if that ends up working out. That's how I see the 2 teams meeting up there. And then going into the South region, I think Baylor is an overwhelming favorite to come out of there, but Ohio State, potentially, or Arkansas, I don't think they're going to be too much of a pushover, but I think Baylor's just, the competition, I think Trey talked about this earlier, but, the Big 12 is not an easy conference. And for them to still come out on top with the regular season title there, I think that has to speak volumes to, how good they've been playing against the tough teams as well. Michigan's going to be interesting with the Isaiah Livers injury. I think that could, factor in hugely for them and their route to potentially making a Final Four. And this is only Juwan Howard's second year behind the bench there. So, and his first at the tournament. So it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of, adjust and handle the situation like this.
Trey, I know you've been pretty critical of Michigan down the stretch here as far as their drop-off in play. Just how concerned are you of the Wolverines being the last of the number 1 seeds there? Do you think that they could be one of the number 1 seeds that ends up getting upset here?
I do. I think out of the 4 seeds, I think they're the most likely to be upset early. But I do think they have a pretty decent draw as it stands. I think they could have a tough matchup with LSU in the second round if LSU's defense decides to show up. That's kind of been the story of their season. When their defense is playing well, their team's playing well. When the defense doesn't show up, LSU has trouble keeping up scoring, even though they have some pretty dynamic scorers on their offense. So I think LSU could be a tough matchup for them in the second round. But if they can get past LSU, I don't see Colorado being much of a threat to them in the Sweet 16. So they should be able to make it to the Elite 8. I would think so. But if I had to pick a 1 seed to lose early, it would be Michigan.
And Chicco, what are your thoughts on somebody, maybe not a 1 seed, but somebody that you think has one of the easiest paths and pathways to getting to the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, and the Final Four? Is there a team that you like with the draw that isn't the number 1 seed that you can see, running the table here?
I like West Virginia. I do think they can get through to the Sweet 16. I'm not so high on Houston. Maybe it's the fact that they play the American Conference, but I do like Huggins' squad, and they rebound well, they shoot the 3 well, and I think this is a favorable draw for them to at least make the Sweet 16 and potentially get to the Elite 8.
Yeah, they're in the Midwest. They would have to play, looks like Clemson, Houston, and then eventually have to match up with somebody like Illinois or Oklahoma State. Trey, what are your thoughts on West Virginia being able to run the table?
Yeah, I think they have a pretty legit chance at making it to the Sweet 16 or further. I'm kind of the same on Houston. It might just be because I haven't watched a ton of them this year, being that they're in a smaller conference. But West Virginia, I think, can beat anybody in the country on any given day. Now, if they do end up facing off against Illinois, eventually, I think that would be a very tough matchup for them. But I don't see why they couldn't make it that far to begin with.
And is there kind of, again, you don't know too much about, we're not going to know as much info on these, these lower end seeds that maybe we would about the top seeds, but is there one of these, later, maybe 14, 15, or 16 seeds, Chicco, that you think has a shot here to possibly get an upset, at least in the first round and maybe even in the second round, and kind of have one of those Cinderella stories? Is there a team that you're looking at that maybe in one of your brackets you're going to take to maybe go further in the tournament than it's anticipated here?
I think a lot of people might be leaning the same way, but I think Virginia is vulnerable right away coming off the bat. I think Ohio has the potential to potentially get to the Sweet 16. I believe the last time they were in the tournament, they also made a run to Sweet 16 as well. They've got one of the best players in the nation in Jason Preston. He's averaging 16 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, almost 2 steals per game. And earlier in the season, he went toe-to-toe with Illinois, obviously one of the best teams in the country, and Iowa Sunmu, and they almost actually pulled out the victory. They just came up short. But I do think that's a team to watch out for, especially if Creighton's unable to get by UC Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara, I think, has a chance to upset Creighton in that matchup as well. So I think Ohio is the team that I think, if I had to pick a team that could make a run to the Sweet 16, I'd pick Ohio.
Trey, your thoughts on Ohio and maybe the team you're looking at as well?
Yeah, I think Ohio does have as far as a 13 seed goes, a favorable draw, getting matched up with Virginia as their 4, and then Creighton and Santa Barbara as the next round matchup. I think that's very doable considering the circumstances. I don't know if there's another team that I would necessarily like to pick to go to the Sweet 16. Obviously, there's probably going to be one, but it's just so hard to predict. But I do think a team to watch out for would be Iona down there, the 15 seed playing Alabama. Just Rick Pitino returning to the tournament for the first time, and I don't know how long. I'm not saying there's a good chance they're going to beat Alabama, but I think that's a game I would want to keep my eye on.
Thanks for another segue, Trey. On ESPN Radio earlier this week, they had a discussion where which of the two storylines, and I want to get these gentlemen's thoughts on it as well, which storyline is more intriguing to you with this tournament? It was either Georgetown with Patrick Ewing being the head coach, going back there and trying to get his team back to relevance here, or Rick Pitino taking Iona deep into this tournament. So, Chicco, let's start off with you. Which of those two storylines do you think is more intriguing to you going into this tournament?
I just can't see Iona getting by Alabama. I think they're obviously well coached, Rick Pitino. I just don't see it happening. I think Georgetown maybe has a shot to win a game or two. I don't put much confidence into that, but I think the fact that Georgetown hasn't had many good years in quite some time, and to see a local product, one of their the program's best stars, and Patrick Ewing come back and kind of lead them back to prominence. He was the first player and coach to win the Big East. First person to win the Big East as a player and coach in the conference. So I think that's a pretty significant conference, pretty significant deal for him. He's the last 3 years, he's kind of been hovering around that 500 mark. So for him to actually come through and get some hardware for once kind of gives, some validation to the program that it's somewhat on the right track, especially after, they lost Mac McClung in the transfer portal. They also lost James Akinjo. So, I think a lot of people were kind of doubting whether, he was the right guy for the job and, with the direction that Georgetown was heading. But I think for them to win the Big East and potentially win a game or two in the tournament, I think it's going to be really intriguing.
Trey, do you echo that as well? Rick Pitino or Patrick Ewing, which one are you saying is more intriguing going into this tournament?
I think from a national media perspective, they're going to say Iona is, just because Rick Pitino is the more polarizing figure, especially when it comes to, I think, recency bias. But me personally, I'm more interested in Georgetown. I think Patrick Ewing going back to Georgetown and like Chico said, losing Mac McClung, I thought that was going to be extremely detrimental to their team. We see how important he is to Texas Tech and their offense. So the fact that he was able to overcome that and win their conference and now have a shot to advance in the tournament, that's the one that I'd be more interested in. But I wouldn't be surprised if the national media focuses more on Iona.
Okay, and focusing in on a couple of more guys here from NBADraft.net currently has Cade Cunningham and Evan Mobley going 1-2 in the upcoming NBA draft from Oklahoma State and USC. What are you expecting from Cade Cunningham in this tournament, Chico? Are you expecting him to dominate and run away as the number one pick in this upcoming NBA draft?
I think he's pretty much already solidified himself as number one. And don't get me wrong, Evan Mobley is very talented as well. And I think the top 5 of this draft, if you're an NBA team and you're selecting there and you're going to get one of the consensus top 5 prospects, I think you're going to be really pleased. But Cade Cunningham has just had a fantastic year. He's playing his best basketball at the right time for them going into the tournament. And there aren't many lead ball handlers with his size, his frame, and doing the stuff that he does. He's got such great vision on the court. He can shoot from distance. He can post up on smaller guards, and he kind of has the flair for the clutch moments. He's not afraid to take the big shots and make them as well. And so I think Cade's going to be, for some people, it might be their first time watching him. I think they're going to be thrilled to see what he can do. And Mobley's an intriguing prospect as well, unique in the sense that there aren't many 7-footers that can handle the ball and pass the way that he does. And he's also a fantastic shot blocker. So I think, for those two kind of get that spotlight on the national stage, I think fans are going to be really excited, especially if you're a fan of one of those teams that are, in the bottom 5 this year.
Interesting stuff to look at as well, Trey. I'll let you mention, since your knowledge of this player, because you cover the Tennessee Vols as a contributing writer. So what are your thoughts on Keon Johnson? He's projected maybe at the end of the top 10 there, maybe high as up as 6, remember the 6 to 10 range overall. What are your thoughts on him, Keon Johnson from Tennessee, as a freshman coming out this year? What are you looking from him, and kind of your thoughts on his play this year as somebody who's projected pretty high in the NBA draft this year?
We kind of touched on it off air, but I think inconsistent is the best word. He's very raw. Still, he's got a ton of athleticism. He probably had the dunk of the year, at least in the SEC, against Georgia earlier this season. He's extremely athletic. He's just very raw, and it's gonna take some fine tuning. But you see it a lot in the NBA now. They don't necessarily, once you get past the top 2 or 3 picks, they don't necessarily draft straight off of skill, but more so potential and athleticism, which Keon definitely has. Now, if he's able to put together a good run, maybe lead a charge to upset Oklahoma State in the second round, maybe he could see his draft stock go up. But I think right around 7 to 10 is where he should go, and that seems about accurate.
Okay, we'll see if his draft stock goes up, if he can take Tennessee to a deep run this year into the tournament. We'll have to wait and see. But lastly, as far as a player I want to mention, and Trey sent me this to look at, Chico, your thoughts on Oral Roberts sophomore Max Abmas. He is currently ranked first in the nation in points per game at 24.2 points a game. And Oral Roberts, if you didn't know, their odds are currently at plus 50,000 to win the tournament. So basically the second last bracket as far as the bottom teams as far as odds go. So what are your thoughts on him somehow getting them in a spot where they can maybe upset somebody as one of those very big sleeper teams at this point, as him leading the nation in points per game?
Yeah, he's averaging 24.7 a game. He scored over 40 points twice this year. He can get to the free throw line at will and knock down a lot of three-pointers. So he's definitely going to be one to watch for sure in that matchup. But I do think Ohio State is just too talented. I think it's going to be tough for him to be able to lead the team to the upset. But, I mean, you never know, right? I mean, we've seen guys in recent years where all it takes is one player to kind of, get hot and, run away with this thing. I mean, we've seen it in the past, whether you're talking about Steph Curry on Davidson or you're talking about Kemba Walker on UConn a decade ago. I don't see this happening with Oral Roberts, but, I mean, you never know, right? It's the beauty of the tournament.
Yeah, no, for sure. And with that said, let's get into the portion that everybody wants to hear here. And again, I'm sure people will be doing many brackets themselves, but I'll be doing one, but I'll definitely be taking what these gentlemen say seriously, because they cover the sport. So I'll listen to their their opinions a lot more than my own, so I'm not going to be picking a Final Four, but I want to get their thoughts on this as well. So with that said, gentlemen, after all that we've talked about today, previewing the tournament, I want to get your Final Four for our listeners here. So Chicco, let's start off with you. Who do you have going to the Final Four and then eventually winning the tournament in your mind, as far as who's had the strongest year this year?
I don't think I've ever done this, but I've kept it pretty boring, and I have the 4 number 1 seeds going to the Final Four with Gonzaga coming out on top. I don't feel great about Michigan, but I do think their draw could help them at least get to Elite Eight. If they get to Elite Eight, I think it's possible we could see Texas or even Alabama beating Michigan at that point. Again, the whole Isaiah Livers injury is kind of a wild card as to their chances, but I think they've really benefited from a pretty decent draw. I don't feel great about putting them in my Final Four, but I have them there. But so Gonzaga, Michigan, Baylor, Illinois, and I have Gonzaga coming out on top. But I mean, that matchup could go either way to Illinois. I wouldn't be surprised either.
Okay, so having the 4 number 1s, Chicco, when was the last time that happened where the 4 number 1s ended up making it to the Final Four?
Not sure, to be honest.
You're not sure? Okay. I think it's been a long time ago. I think it's been multiple decades since that's happened. So the odds are not in the favor of the 4 number 1s making it. But that's interesting. Maybe this year in the COVID season, I don't know if that plays into it. But Trey, do you have something different other than the 4 number 1s?
Yeah. So I have Gonzaga making it out of the West. I just don't see anybody on that part of the bracket that I think can beat Gonzaga. The only team I think can beat Gonzaga is Iowa. But for Iowa to even make it to that point, I think is going to be a long shot for them. And then Gonzaga, I still think would just prove to be too much against Iowa. So I got them beating Iowa to advance to the Final Four. And the East, I actually have your Texas Longhorns advancing. I like their draw. I like their path. I'm not high on Michigan, so that's probably part of the reason. But I have Texas as the 3 seed advancing in the East. In the Midwest, I have Illinois. And then in the South, I'm taking a pretty big flyer on this, but I like Arkansas to make a run.
Wow, Arkansas. Okay, so what their odds? I'm looking for Arkansas, where they are plus 4,000 on OddsShark. So what's with the thoughts of Arkansas there?
Well, being in the SEC, I watch a lot of SEC basketball. They were one of the hottest teams going down the stretch. They started the season, I think, with 4 straight losses in conference play, and then they won every game the rest of the season up until the semifinal of the SEC tournament, and that included a win over Alabama when I think they were ranked like 4th or 6th in the country. Their offense is high octane. They can go for days. They just don't get tired. They play very fast paced, and I think that's good for a tournament setting. They have the depth so that they're not going to get tired. And it's just crazy stuff always happens in the tournament. I don't think Baylor is going to be able to make it all the way through. I can't really give you a reason why. It's just a gut feeling. I don't think they'll make it, and I don't want to see just top seeds make it. Although this is the first year I can remember in a long time where it just seems like you have 4 teams that are just clear cut or above everybody else. Mm-hmm. So I would not be surprised, like what Chicco said, if all 1 seeds made it. But it's the tournament; anything can happen, and you got to root for a little bit of chaos.
Oh yeah, that's what makes this tournament special, and that we've been missing for 2 years now in the making. So Chicco has Gonzaga winning, and Trey, who do you have winning?
I have Illinois beating Gonzaga.
Illinois over Gonzaga in the finals. So interesting stuff there. Trey, I know you're a betting guy, so I'll let you get one more betting comment in before we wrap up the show today. Who are you looking at? You obviously mentioned Arkansas is a nice bet at plus 4,000, but who are you maybe looking at to place a bet come Thursday here on somebody lower down the list?
At plus 2,100, I like Texas's odds. Like I said, I really like their draw. I think that would be a good matchup for them against Alabama should they meet in the Sweet 16. Alabama doesn't have that really big low post presence, which I think could become a factor. So I like Texas as more. It's not necessarily a long shot, but at plus 2,100, that'd be a nice payout.
Tennessee's at plus 7,000. Trey, how far do you think that realistically they're making it in this tournament?
I think they can get past Oklahoma State if they play like they did against Alabama. I think Oklahoma State. I haven't watched a ton of them, but outside of Cade Cunningham, I don't know how great the rest of their team really is. I think they get past them, but I don't see them getting past Illinois. So Sweet 16 is the furthest I can see them even advancing.
Okay.
But on the same hand, I think they could also lose to Oregon State in the first game.
Oof.
That's just how inconsistent they've been.
Sweet 16 or bust, essentially, for the Tennessee Vols. But, Chicco, I'll give you last word here. Is there a player maybe you're looking at from this tournament, as somebody who covers the NBA as well, that you're thinking that their draft stock could skyrocket if they have a good tournament here and maybe separate themselves from the pack here as one guy that you're looking at to have a great tournament and boost his draft odds for the NBA?
I don't know if I would say that it would boost it considerably, but as Trey alluded to, Arkansas, I think, is definitely a candidate to make a deep run there. I'm a big fan of the Muss Bus, and Eric Musselman's done a fantastic job there in his 2 years in charge. And, they've had some big wins and are probably one of the hottest teams going into the actual tournament. So Moses Moody, obviously, is their star player leading the charge. That's a guy that I think, could be able to put themselves – I don't know if he'd put himself in the top 5 conversation, but he put himself just outside of that if he has a good run. If UConn were to make a run, which I'm not sure if it happens, but hey, it's March and their last 2 national championships, were kind of unexpected. But James Bouknight is another guy who could probably kind of establish himself as a top 10 pick. He's kind of hovering around that lottery area, and we haven't been able to see him play the whole season because he missed, I believe, 8 or 9 games with an elbow injury. But I think if he doesn't get injured, he's probably your Big East player of the year. And the way he's able to potentially take over games, he's dropped 40 points on Creighton earlier this year. I think if he has a game or two like that in the tournament, it could definitely put him really right in that top 10 conversation for sure.
Yeah, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of good insight from my 2 co-hosts today regarding teams to look out for, players to look out for, and just a lot of great insight today regarding NCAA basketball. And I appreciate having both of them on today for this very special episode. But with that said, I hope everybody enjoys the tournament. Again, we missed out last year, so everybody's going to enjoy it this year. It starts on Thursday, so it's going to be wild and a lot of fun. We'll have to see what kind of March Madness moments we get from this tournament. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for our March Madness 2021 preview. A lot of great insight today from my 2 co-hosts. Really appreciate them coming on and giving their insight to college basketball, something that I would not be able to give you guys. So really happy to have them on. And again, this has been a very special edition of the Ballin' in 6 podcast on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Again, your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13 with a Canadian Z. And as well to my co-host, firstly, Trey. You can follow him on Twitter at Treigh Patterson. Again, he contributing writer for Fox Sports Knoxville, covering the Tennessee Vols. Trey, really happy to have you back on talking about Vols basketball. Hopefully I'll have you back on talking about the college football prospects and for the upcoming NFL draft. So appreciate your insight as always.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Anytime I get to talk college sports, it's always a good day.
Absolutely. And secondly, to my other co-host, he is Chicco Nacion, again, from thescore.com, covering basketball, NCAA, and NBA as well. Always great to have him on the show to give his insight on basketball for our network. So, Chicco, always appreciated, man, taking time out for us on the network and talking basketball. You're the number one guy I want on this show, so always appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, always a pleasure, man. It's probably one of my favorite times of the year with March Madness and the NBA both taking place. So Just love talking about college basketball.
Good luck to your UConn Huskies as well this year. Again, my Texas Longhorns, you guys are high on them, so maybe I'll be happy for once, because I sure as heck am not happy about Texas football this year and any year. So, good luck to the Vols, the Huskies, and the Longhorns for the three hosts on this show. But with that said, guys, this has been the Ballin' in the Six podcast on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. Enjoy March Madness. We'll see you guys next time.